Chapter 2. The Forest. When Jill opened her eyes, the night had passed. Sunbeams met with the mist on the border of the forest and created patterns of rainbows in midair. It only took a few moments for Jill to reorient herself and remember where she was. She looked around, startled, as she recalled the hurried flight from the city the evening before, angry at herself for falling asleep so close to the edge of the meadow where she might be visible to the watchman. The events of the last hours were still a blur in her mind. Jill tried to replay all the details, but couldn't make sense of them. It was like another day. She had gone to school, and through all her normal daily rituals, classes, studying, duties, loneliness. As usual, she waited in the park for her caretaker for the long walk home. Unlike most other children, Jill wasn't allowed to walk on her own through Vender, nor was she allowed to cover her face like most other citizens. Wherever she went in the city, her face was exposed and uncovered, visible to all citizens, a shame face. Jill waited for nearly an hour on a bench under a poplar tree, sketching in her notebook as unseen birds chirped in the solitude of the park. Her caretaker never arrived. He had never been late before. When the curfew alarm started to howl, Jill felt her first sensation of anxiety. Watchmen descended on the streets in their yellow and green uniforms and started to usher people to their homes. Men wearing dark red masks with no features other than slits for the eyes and mouths frantically rushed along the street, murmuring to women covered with dark blue veils. A rumor was suddenly alive. Another cell in Vender was harboring escaped workers from one of the labor camps. The council was going to search entire neighborhoods, find the culprits. Panicked citizens filled the streets, and everywhere people ran to their houses while the curfew siren wailed. The tension seemed to be at a breaking point. In the last few weeks, the council started aggressive interrogations. People were imprisoned. In the night, others disappeared. Someone in the city had been in contact with someone in the forest. The revelation rocked the city gossip, and Jill only imagined the looks on faces shrouded with veils. Were they expressions of doubt? Of fear? For years, the council made an effort at every turn to proudly announce that the forest was no longer inhabited. The people of Vender had learned to avoid the council's attention at all costs, especially to raise any suspicion of disloyalty. The surprising report about life in the forest raised doubts. Doubts, if discovered by the council, would lead to punishment, like banishment to labor camps. Her caretaker was nowhere to be seen. How would she get to her foster home? As the streets began to empty, Jill started to panic. The council enforced the strict law with a harsh public caning for any shameface, a daughter or son of disgrace, young or old, who was found alone on the street, not accompanied by a caretaker. The same sick feeling came to her stomach, like a hand seized it and squeezed hard, forcing bile into her throat when Jill remembered the watchman's words that pulled her from her dark daydream on the bench. "Shameface, you, there." Jill turned slowly to face him, bracing herself. "What are you doing out here alone? You're ordered to your home." He wore a green uniform, but the mask on his face was orange, a junior officer. "Sir," Jill replied, swallowing the bile, "my caretaker hasn't come." "Is he always so careless? I'll report her." "No, sir, it's a he. He's never been late." "Are you telling me you've never waited until dark, then walked the streets alone?" The watchman squinted at Jill through the slits in her mask. "What's this man's rank?" "He wears the white veil of the council." "An original?" the guard whispered in surprise. He thought it over. "A councilman as caretaker? I've never heard of such a thing." The man yanked her by the arm and started walking. "He's busy defending Vender against the threat of people like your parents who no doubt abandoned you and covered you with their shame." "Where are you taking me?" Jill asked, alarmed as he dragged her beyond the school gate and out of the park. "To your home, and quickly. You will tell me the way. You'd know you can't walk the streets on your own. Your caretaker has taught well that you and all your kind are living reminders of the shame of Vender's past." He shook Jill, and he said it, then let her go, pushing her to walk in front of him. "What grade are you in, girl?" Jill frowned and looked up at the watchman. "What grade are you in?" he repeated slowly, as though Jill had not understood. 5. "Of the youngest, then. Perhaps one of the last in the council's program." He pushed her to keep walking, squeezing her arm and pushing her forward faster than she would walk. Jill turned onto a narrow alleyway across the city toward her caretaker's home. "When you are old and die," he said, "maybe then Vender will be purged of indignity, of all those former things." He spat on the ground. A trail of saliva dripped from the edge of his mask. Jill watched it stretched until it touched her arm just above where his hand gripped her. They weaved through the city streets from the school toward an edge of town. When she got to the foster home, her arm was sore, bruised. "There you are," the junior watchman announced, pushing her onto the cement. "I've spared you from a caning tonight, though I'm sure you deserve it for something. You will tell your caretaker that Junior Watchman Spake has done this." "Yes, sir." The watchman put his hand over his heart. "For the council alone." Jill put her hand to her heart and mumbled back, "For the council alone." And the officer was off. She quietly walked up the steps and through the door of her caretaker's small house. It was unassuming, like all the others on the street, tucked away in an old neighborhood behind large trees. When visiting members of the council dined with her caretaker, they often commented on its smallness. Most members of the council lived in mansions in the center of town or on streets where original but shameless city members lived. The council seemed to have no problem with old wealth, though it despised most other things. "Daughter, where have you been?" a worried voice met her as she entered the house. It was Salma, the old servant who kept the caretaker's house. "Did you walk alone?" "An orange watchman brought me home. He didn't come." At the words, Salma shuddered. She was old, wrinkled, and hunched. She walked with a limp, but her age and manner were deceiving. She was sharp and feisty and unafraid to speak critically of the council, even in front of Jill's caretaker. She was forbidden to wear a veil, but Jill guessed even if she was permitted, she would refuse to cover her face. Salma watched over Jill ever since she was moved into the foster home. Jill's caretaker knew Salma before the council came to power in Bender, before enforced curfews, before the mines and the masks. "She is the best help in the city. She might be disgraced, but she is unmatched in her skill with an iron, and a wash basin, and a skillet," Jill had heard her caretaker say when he defended his decision to let a shamefaced manage his household. But then the visiting council member would sit down and eat, and all his or her reservations about Salma would be lost in the delicious enjoyment of her food. Sometimes, when they were alone, when it was safe to risk it, Salma whispered Jill old stories of different times and far-off places, stories with magic in them. These were Jill's favorite moments, but they were very few. "I was sick with worry, child. It's almost dark. I thought they'd found you. I thought they had finally figured it out and taken you away." Jill scrunched her nose. "Who did you think found me?" "Terrible, horrible men who have been searching for you for a very long time." Jill stopped unbuttoning her coat and looked up at Salma. "Jill, there is very little time. It is not my story to tell. Take off that coat and put this on." Salma reached into the closet and pulled out a red wool coat that had shiny golden buttons. Salma returned to the closet, found a white box, and pulled out a thick gold veil. "And this?" "Salma, where did you get these things? Only town daughters can wear the red coat and the golden veil." "Put them on." "But if I'm caught, they'll—" "You can't let them catch you. They will not. He will protect you." "Who will?" Salma stopped, winked at Jill, then finally relaxed and smiled. "He who guards us all." It was another of her riddles, her magical stories that weren't ever supposed to be spoken in Bender. "You'll walk into that understanding when the time is right. No more questions, child. There is no time." "No time for what?" "You must walk away from here, away from Bender, and not return. Leave the house. You can't be seen with your caretaker. Take Derby Road until it connects with Center Street. You'll find a street in the north called Ashley. Speak with no one, for town daughters do not speak. There is a home on Ashley Street that belongs to a member of the council. She's on our side." "Our side." Salma pressed her forehead close to Jill and pulled it into a hug. Her arms were strong, assuring. "You'll recognize it by its red gate. Go there. It's on the edge of town. From there you'll be told what to do." Though the sun was out, Jill shivered. Dew from the leaves and grass where she had fallen asleep soaked her pants and shoes. The coat, however, kept the moisture away from her body and kept her quite warm all through the night. Jill looked at her surroundings. She had imagined the forest a number of times, and now she stood inside of it. Mossy beards hung from the trunks of trees that stood like giants frozen in time. Their branches extended like arms in every direction, so high into the air that the sun's light at midday would be blocked below them. Although she was only a few steps into the forest, Jill noticed it was unnaturally dark and cool. Though darker than the sunlit meadow, the forest was a colorful place, and Jill found its sounds and smells startling. It had a permanent smell of spring rain, a smell that reminded Jill of water and earth and freshness. The mist from the night before remained and not only bordered the tree line of the forest, but curled and moved along the path until it disappeared into the darkness and underbrush of the trees. When Jill looked down, she could no longer see the path or her feet. Her red coat, with its gold shining buttons, was visible, but her pants and walking shoes disappeared into the thick mist. In the daytime, Jill did not feel uneasy about being in the forest. If anything, she felt compelled to stay and explore, an overwhelming feeling so different from the night before, one she noticed but could not explain. Jill saw that the forest had many different types of trees, trees with needles and trees with leaves. She imagined how thick the forest floor would be with leaves in the autumn when nature pulled them to the ground, preparing the earth for snow. There were trees with dark brown bark that looked hard and strong as metal, and there were trees with white-colored bark that peeled at her touch, like snakes shedding skin. All the leaves were green, but at certain times, out of the corner of her eye, they seemed to glisten gold, shine red in hue, glimmer like silver. When Jill saw such color flash in the corner of her eye, she would quickly turn, and as she did, the colors disappeared. Further into the forest, she could hear the sound of water. Soon she discovered a stream curving its way between rolling banks. At the sound of the water, Jill realized how thirsty she was. She tried to calculate how many hours it had been since she had a drink of anything. She knelt down at the water and awkwardly scooped it into her hand and drank from her palm. At the stream's edge, the mist evaporated, and Jill noticed in its place small blue, white, and yellow flowers. Purple heather was scattered and growing all about. Great, thick mosses, colored green and orange, grew over fallen trees and all along the stream's banks, forming what to Jill looked like giant but soft beds. She longed to run and throw herself onto them, but continued to walk along the path. Jill found some wild raspberries growing along the path and stopped to snack on them. They were overripe. The red berries were easy to miss, well hidden under large green leaves. The berries stained Jill's fingertips and tongue. They were sweet, and revealed to Jill how hungry she was. Jill rummaged through her pockets in hopes of finding some leftover snacks from the ones Salma had scrounged up from her caretaker's cupboards the night before. Jill found nothing but a single stick of chewing gum in her left outside pocket. She popped it into her mouth and then pulled out the letter she was given at the house with the red gate after her nervous walk through the city, unaccompanied and veiled. She had not been stopped or hindered in her illegal walk to Ashley Street, though at every step she feared a watchman or a citizen would confront her, pull off her veil, and reveal her shame. The green-veiled woman, a member of the council with a large house, met her at the door. All the lights were off in her home, and she ushered Jill through the house to a back room where, to her surprise, her caretaker was busy at a table piled with papers. The caretaker was leafing through the piled papers, selecting certain documents, and throwing them into a burning fire. But he stopped his urgent work, came to Jill's side, and for the first time since they had met, leaned down and hugged her to his chest. Jill had never seen her caretaker's face, but she imagined that it was kind, a strong and gentle face, noble like his eyes. In that moment she longed to see it, even for a moment, but she didn't get to. Before he spoke with her, before he told her to run with all speed to the forest, he handed her a letter and told her to open it only when she was in the safety of the trees. Then he kissed her on the cheek. If they catch you before you reach the forest, destroy the letter. It cannot fall into their hands. If you don't make it to the forest, Jill, more lives than your own will be lost. They cannot know he still has contact with people inside this city. Jill held a neat white envelope sealed with a thick blue wax seal in her hands. There was no return address or stamp, but had her proper address on the front, written in plain, neat letters. Jill Strong, 14 Sunrise Lane, vendor, T4P 1J5. Jill looked up at the green canopy of leaves above her, so different from the wooden roof under which she was given the letter the night before. Her mind buzzed. She turned the envelope over and studied the wax seal. Upon closer examination, she saw that it was imprinted with the profile of a horse's face. Jill picked up a small twig from the path, slipped it under the seal, and broke it. When Jill pulled the letter from the envelope, shivers rushed up and down her spine. Jill unfolded the letter and noticed that it was dated 7 February. It was more than 9 months old. Jill read the crisp, cursive letters. It was written with a hurried hand. The letter read, Dear Jill, Peace. If you are reading this letter, then I rejoice. You are alive and well, and your time to enter the great forest has come. Your caretaker has been trustworthy and has kept you from the terrible influence of the council. It is he who has decided the timing upon which you are entrusted with our correspondence. Doubtless you have many questions and fears. These questions I cannot now address, though I know circumstances in Vender are grim. I can only assure you that while you are in the forest, you are safe. Jill, you must find your way along the path to the great hall, the home in the forest that is under my charge. It is of utmost importance that you come quickly and come alone. Do not delay. I write this letter in haste, for there is trouble in some of the other lands under my charge that are beyond Vender and the forest. I must leave soon. I cannot tarry much longer, and when I leave on this journey, I will be gone for some time. Be of good courage, Jill. It is no coincidence you were born into the strong family and bear that name. You come from a family of strength. Do not fear entrance to the forest. In a little while, we will meet, and I will no longer be a name without a face. I look forward to that day. Until we meet, perhaps to know each other by different names. The Keeper of the Great Forest. Jill ran her finger over the name again. The Keeper of the Great Forest. The name seemed vaguely familiar. She tried to remember if she had ever heard Salma tell a story about him, but the effort was like trying to remember details from a long-ago dream of the night. Jill often found that real life seemed less exciting than the things she could imagine. In fact, real life often left her disappointed. As she stood in the forest, holding the letter, something inside told her that everything was about to change. She couldn't say why she felt that way. It was just something she all of a sudden knew. The same way she knew there would be a surprise quiz awaiting her at school, or that her poem would be selected the prize winner in the War Veterans Poetry Contest before she even entered into the competition. No one had told her these things, but by some odd chance, without trying to, she had thought them before they happened. And when they turned out to be true, her heart beat a little faster, and she could only wonder if she had been touched by some invisible magic. As Jill walked the forest path toward the mysterious great hall, her heart beat with that feeling. Eventually, Jill came to a point where the path intersected with the stream and she could go no further. The stream widened where it met the path so that it was too wide for Jill to jump across. Jill went to the water's edge and saw that the water was rather deep. She couldn't simply walk through it and hope only to get her shoes wet. Jill looked for a log or some other thing she could use as a bridge to cross the stream, but could find nothing. She turned back to the stream to test just how deep it was, and when she did, she stopped motionless in her tracks. In front of Jill was a tall creature, 2 or 3 times her own height, wearing a dark black robe. The creature's face was hidden under a black hood. Jill could see only gray and black shadows instead of a face, like she was peering into a cave. She might have screamed, if the creature did not speak first, before she was able to think. "What are you doing in the forest alone?" The creature tilted its head to the side. "I can tell from the look of your dress you come from Vender, but town daughters are usually veiled, are they not?" Jill put her hand to her face. They went cold. She had discarded the veil when she awoke, unaccustomed and uncomfortable with its heat and limited visibility. "Citizens of Vender are not supposed to be inside the forest." Jill stared blankly at the creature for a moment. It was taller than a watchman and cloaked differently. It was frightening to look at, but its voice was calm, if not kind. Jill was frozen, but found her bearings and remembered the letter. She fumbled with the button that closed her inside jacket pocket and pulled out the letter. "See, it's written to me." Jill stared at the creature, then held out her hand, offering the letter. Jill gasped when the creature pulled back its hood, took the letter from her, and started to read it. The creature looked like a man, a very tall man, but had dark blue skin. Purple markings and patterns like a tattoo traced all along the bridge of the creature's nose, parted at its forehead, and covered the creature's bald head along each temple down its neck. How far the purple pattern went, Jill could only guess. The rest of its body was shrouded in black cloth. The creature's eyes were most astonishing. Dark brown irises, darker than the bark of the trees in the forest, were surrounded not by white, but by gold. They were the most extraordinary eyes Jill had ever seen. Realizing she had been staring at the creature for some time, Jill looked at the ground, muttering sorry. The creature slowly nodded its head and suppressed a smile and returned the letter. "Why didn't you say you know the keeper?" it said, folding the paper into the envelope and handing it back to Jill. "I don't. At least we've never met," Jill replied, "but it sounds like he knows me." She added quickly, mostly to herself, "You come at a strange time, under strange circumstances. Town daughters do not carry such things." Jill looked at the ground again and mumbled, "I'm not a town daughter. I'm a daughter of disgrace." Such a letter has not been seen in the forest for quite some time. Why not? Jill asked. Because the keeper is no longer here. Where is he? No one knows, said the creature with a sigh. But the keeper of the forest is mysterious, has always been, and has many other lands. Jill shuddered with a look of bewilderment on her face. Somehow, I think I knew that. It says so here in the letter. I know, Jill said, but that's not what I mean. Suddenly I have a faint memory of this forest like I've been here before, a memory of stories. From who? Jill squinted her eyes and looked at the creature, trying to think, and after thinking, trying to decide whether she should say anything. As she looked at it, the creature exhaled loudly from its nostrils, let go of the envelope, and took a step back. Some from my caretaker's house in Bender, and Jill hesitated. And from my mother? Jill breathed deeply. My mother told me the stories when I was a little girl. They are the first stories I can remember. She had a... Jill stopped and looked away from the creature. A tear swelled in her eye. She had a book full of them, Jill said, looking beyond the creature, far off into the woods across the stream. A book? What kind? The creature said hurriedly. It was big and heavy and old with pictures. I saw it for the first time in a long time last night, but wasn't able to look at it. Jill touched her hand to her head. Maybe that's where I've seen this forest. I can't remember much. The council, Bender. Since I've lived there, I've forgotten so many things. It's like my memory of people, of places from before have been erased. I've forgotten faces, names, but the book is much older than this road or the forest and its trees. I remember that. It was sealed shut with a lock that can only be opened with one key, a key that cannot be found. Upon hearing Jill's explanation, the creature bowed to one knee and put its hand over its heart. Dear child, speak no further, for I have heard the story of your mother and also of the key. What was done to your mother was evil. Did you know my mother? No. You need to remember those stories. They are as real as anything you can feel or touch. They are truer than all these things, the creature said, pointing to the trees around them, and should not be forgotten. It's been so long since I heard them, Jill confessed. I can hardly remember them at all. They are part of you. They will be told again. Jill smiled and quickly brushed away the tear. Well, Jill said, clearing her throat, I need to go to the Great Hall, only I don't know how to get there. The path I was told to follow runs into the stream, and it looks too wide and deep for me to cross alone. If you will, I can lead you down the path, for I am one of the caretakers of this forest, and know the path well. Thank you, but I was asked to walk the path alone. I understand, said the creature, almost sadly. Once you follow the stream, continue to follow the path. Soon you will come to the house under the keeper's care. With that, the creature bowed once more, then pulled the hood over its head. Once again, Jill looked into the dark cave it created over the creature's face. Jill was about to ask how the creature would help her cross the stream when she realized the forest was completely silent. All the forest noises she had become used to, birds high in the trees, squirrels crawling about here and there, even the sound of the stream itself, were muted. Jill looked about and was shocked to realize that nothing in the forest moved. There was no more breeze. The stream itself ceased to flow. A bird flying overhead froze in the air in mid-flight. Jill looked at the creature, and it merely gestured with a move of its hand for Jill to cross the river. Jill gave the creature a questioning look and slowly walked to the water's edge. She crouched down and timidly touched her hand against the water. It was hard and solid as ice. Jill pulled her hand back in surprise. She looked back at the creature and smiled bashfully. The creature merely gestured again for her to cross. So, Jill slowly took a step onto the surface of the water, half fearing she might fall through, half disbelieving what she was about to do. When she put her weight on her foot, she was relieved and amazed to see that she was standing on the stream. It was hard as ice, but still looked like liquid, only stopped or paused in time. Jill took a few more quick steps. The water was not slippery either. Jill made it to the other side of the stream and let out a whoop of laughter. When she turned to thank the creature, it was gone. Jill looked back across a flowing stream and saw nothing but a stream bed, the breeze softly blowing hair across her face. The bird, moments earlier stuck in midair, flew up and perched on the branch of a nearby tree. Hey, this is Andrew Kooman, author of 10 Silver Coins. Thanks for listening to Book 1 in the Jill Strong Adventure series, The Drylings of Acchora. If you like what you hear, make sure you subscribe to this channel so you don't miss a chapter. And make sure you check out my website where you can learn more about my work and what I'm writing at www.andrewkooman.com. I love to hear from readers, so please leave a comment on my YouTube channel. And if you're on other social media channels, find me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter for other great content and behind-the-scenes glimpses of my writing and work. Thanks again for listening. Until next time. I want to give a special shout out to Evan Schaeffer for his song Sisyphus, which is what you're hearing right now, and also to Chris Zabriskie for his song The House Glows with Almost No Help. Both are available through the International Creative Commons License 4.0. You can find both artists' work at freemusicarchive.org.